Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. And welcome to Season 20 of Monsters Among Us. Now, if you would have told me 10 years ago that we'd still be doing this show, and not only that, but it would still be growing, I don't think I would believe you. But sometimes, I'm happy to be wrong. Now, folks, I'll be the first to admit I have a bit of a hometown legend hangover. Those special episodes, coupled with the previous week's 911 special, which everyone seemed to really enjoy. And we're working on peppering more of that content in, by the way. We heard you loud and clear. But putting those special episodes together took its toll on myself and my crew. So what I'm getting at here is that this episode came at us pretty quick this week. But we have a motto around here. A motto that we live by. The show must go on. So here we are. And since we're still recovering from those hometown legends, episodes that seem to take twice as long to produce as a regular episode, for whatever reason. So I decided to assemble some stories tonight that A, I don't have to do too much to discuss, but B, still deliver the scares. And there's one subject in my mind that fits both of those descriptors. The entities we'll be covering this evening are super spooky, and there's not much to be said about them that I haven't already. In other words, the stories sort of speak for themselves. And you know, it just so happens that we're due for another visit with this phenomena anyway. So that's my long-winded attempt at introducing tonight's subject. It's our latest installment of the Shadow People Files, Volume 4. And to kick us off here this evening, we begin in parts unknown. Please welcome Wesley to the program.
Hey Derek, this is Wesley. I was going to go ahead and tell you about a really strange thing that happened to me when I was like 12. I had a fish tank in my bedroom when I was growing up, and my bed was on the back right-hand wall of the room, and then in the center of the room, on the opposite side, was a fish tank, and left of that was a TV at an angle facing me. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I noticed that there was just this, like, blinding blue light. It was so bright. Like, everything was fully illuminated in my room, and there was a figure. A very tall, long fingers. With the brightness of the light, it was like more of a silhouette, but it wasn't like a shadow person. It was just hard to tell features. I was like half asleep, and I leaned up, I remember, and I said, "Mom," and it didn't move. It was looking at the fish tank, and it was bent over, and it was touching the glass with its fingers, you know? And then the next thing I remember, I went back to sleep, and I woke up the next morning. I thought it was a dream, you know. I was 12, so I was in the 8th grade, and I had a baseball game. My mom took me after she got off work, and my parents don't drink. I've seen my mom have like a glass of wine, I think, in my whole life. And as we were getting on the interstate, she said, "Did something happen to you last night?" And I said, "Yeah, I had a really weird dream." And she was like, well, that's funny because I woke up in the middle of the night and something told me to check on you. And she went to the door and she said there was this light, like reaching halfway out into the hallway, just really stretching out like it was super duper bright. And then she said she felt a moment of panic and she grabbed the handle to the door. And then she said something told her, he's fine, he's okay, go back to bed. And she did. My mother told me this. She's a social worker, you know? And I was pretty perplexed about that. I was like, that's just another thing I don't understand. Later on in life, I really started to re-examine that, and I asked my mom about it, and she confirmed everything, and I just don't really know what to think about that. But it's a good story. So I wanted to thank you, man, because my 18-month-old son passed away December 1st, and you and the Kryptonaut guys were key in helping me maintain my peace while I was there. We were there for 30 days before they let him go, and I mean, they have just the best people in the whole wide world working there, and you continue to help, and I really appreciate this. This is a great thing that you're doing. All right, man. Have a good night.
Thank you, Wesley. I'm so incredibly sorry for your loss. My heart goes out to you and your entire family. And of course, we're happy to offer up a bit of an escape, at least twice a week. And coincidentally, I'm writing this very episode by the light of my aquarium. I have a 40-gallon set up here in the office. Live plants and everything. Which is an excellent choice if you need a room to be completely quiet for recording purposes. I really didn't think that went through. But the way the light dances on the walls when the bubbles pop, or a fish ripples the surface, it can catch you off guard when you see it out of the corner of your eye. Now, of course, I'm not saying that's what happened with Wesley here. It's just my experience. And one last thing about the call that I will say is just how weird it was that Wesley's mom just went along with the voice that she heard. You'd think she would still want to check on young Wesley, especially since she was seemingly already close to his door. I found that odd, intriguing, and borderline unsettling. So thank you again, Wesley, for taking the time to make the call. And folks, speaking of unsettling, I have several unsettling stories to share with you here tonight. But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
Buy one, get one half off. I'm probably... Contamos con una hogar, oficina o negocio. Te acompañaremos. Bad. They shouldn't be called.
Now next up, we venture to Texas, where we meet with Alaric for our next story.
Hey Derek, it's Alaric. I live in Texas. This is a story of a haunting that I had. And it was whenever I lived in Cleburne, Texas, near Waco and Fort Worth and stuff like that. It was in an old house I used to live in with my mother. I was about 13, so this was in 2012. And pretty much what happened was I've always felt like I was being watched for some reason. I don't know why, but the layout of the place was there was like a farmhouse, and then right next to it was a storage unit building that my grandfather owned. He also owned the house. It was a really, really old house from like the 1800s old. So I always felt that there was some sort of presence there, and it was a 2-story, and the upstairs definitely always felt like I was being watched, and it always had an uneasy feeling. And there was a door going straight to the attic where the air conditioning unit was, and I never liked being near that door or in the room that the door was connected to. And the main experience that I had, that I can at least remember, is that every single time I walked inside the house, I always felt like I was being watched from the right side. And the way it was like whenever you walk up to the front porch, there's like the main door right in front of you for the entrance to the house, and then to your right was where the storage units and everything was. And I was always feeling like I was being watched from the right side. And one day I walked up onto the porch, and then I saw something really fast flash, like right next to me. And whenever I say right next to me, I mean like maybe 5 feet away. So I looked to the right real fast, and I didn't see anything, and I looked around, tried to see maybe if it was a cat or anything like that. But the size of the shadow, or whatever it was that flashed by me, was at least 6 feet tall. And I was 12, so I was pretty short, and even now I'm still short. So I saw it flash by me, and then like I walked, and I got sort of freaked out, and I started shaking a little bit. And I'm actually shaking right now just thinking about it. Anyway, but I walked up into the house, and I opened the door, and we had like a sort of entryway, and then we had 2 doors inside the entryway, one to the left and one to the front right, sort of, that you would go through to go to the different rooms. And my mother always felt that if she put a mirror in front of the doors, then it would ward away bad spirits and stuff like that. She doesn't necessarily believe in ghosts, but she does believe in spirits. But anyway, she always had a mirror facing towards the door or towards larger windows. I walked inside, and the mirror was right in front of me. And it wasn't like I just saw my own shadow, but whenever I walked in, I saw my shadow, and I saw the reflection of me and my facial features and everything. And then behind me, I saw that same 6-foot figure, but I think it was possibly, I'm pretty sure it was a shadow man because it had a large, wide-brimmed hat on. It was definitely a larger male, I'm assuming. I actually got really freaked out, and I just froze, and I didn't know what to do exactly. He was standing behind me, and then I just, I blinked, and in the time that it took me to blink, he was gone. And then ever since then, I never really had any more sightings or anything like that to where it was that close to me. But whenever we drove up into the driveway one day, I saw a figure in the top story window, and I only saw it out of the corner of my eye, and whenever I looked up, it was gone. So I don't know if I was imagining it or what exactly. Anyway, that was my story. I love the podcast. I've actually been binge listening to it for a while now. Anyway, yeah, have a great day.
Thank you, Alaric. Watched by a shadow figure. That's not something I would like to experience, but now that I've heard about it, I bet I'll never stop thinking of it. Now, the next time you feel yourself being watched, good luck not assuming that it was some sort of tall, dark, mysterious figure. Just like I will. And don't even get me started on what might happen if you look into a mirror. Thank you again, Alaric, for sharing the call. Now, folks, if you have a story you would like to share here on the show, call my hotline at 888-608-NIGHT. That's 888-608-NIGHT. Or you can record your story as a voice memo using your phone and email the file to me at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. We're getting more and more stories submitted this way, and I have to say, the sound is considerably better. So keep that in mind when you make your choice. Now, let's work our way north to my old stomping grounds of Ohio. Please welcome Brandon to the program.
Hi, my name is Brandon. I'm from Canton, Ohio. I'm calling because I got an unusual story of the Shadow Man. And to set up the story, I guess I got to start with location. So it takes place in Canton, Ohio, where I'm from. And me and my friends, we'd always go to this park. And behind this park, there's some woods, like only a few acres or something. So we'd go in there and do kid stuff like chop trees, build forts, and all that. So this one night, it was like summer. I had to have been like 11, 12, 13. I'm 20 years old now, so this was a long time ago. We went in there, and how this little patch of woods worked was you go in these woods a little bit, like 30 yards. There's a clearing, then a little drop down to a creek, and it dropped back up bushes, and then the rest of the woods. So we go in there this one day, and for some reason, this little figure catches my eye across this creek. And my friend saw it too. I confirmed it with him a while ago that I wasn't just making this up. He saw it too. But how this figure was, it was behind these bushes, and then these bushes were probably 3 or 4 feet tall. And then it was straight black, Like, no texture, no detail, and then no depth. So, like, you couldn't really see through it, like, to the woods past it, so I know it's not a regular shadow or anything like that. And it was really sunny out. So you would for sure see something behind, like, a shadow. You know what I mean? So it was just standing there. We threw, like, rocks or sticks at it, and it didn't even move. It just, like, stood there behind the bushes. It just was a little bit above it. And it was just weird because we weren't scared at all. And then there's nothing really to it other than it was just a figure, like, no texture, no depth. You couldn't see through it. And that was just weird to me. And then when I was a kid, I was like, oh, it's Bigfoot or whatever, because I was big into that. But it doesn't add up to be like Bigfoot or nothing like that. And then another time we went in there, probably that same summer or whatever, we were going in there, we were walking some of the deer trails, and my one buddy who was there that previous time, he saw something run right across this deer trail, and it scared the absolute hell out of him. Later on, he says it wasn't a deer. It looked like a figure of, like, a person or something. So I guess that's my story. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. A shadow man outside in the woods of Ohio. And it sounds like this occurred only about an hour from where I grew up. Boy, am I glad I never ran into anything like that. Now, I do like that you chucked a few rocks at it, though, Brandon. I'm not sure that was a smart move, but I like that you were curious enough to try to get it to move. Now, it's scary stuff, whatever it was, and we thank you again, Brandon, for sharing the details here with us. Now let's squeeze in one more entry here. I have a shorter one from Mackenzie, out of the state of Washington.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie. I live in a small island in Washington State. Last summer is when this happened on my island. I moved back home with my mother, like a lot of people did during COVID. And because I'm on an island, I actually built a yurt on my mom's property. And one night, I went out to pee, because you have to pee outside when you live in a yurt. And I looked up into my garden area, and I can see a perfect outline, blacker than the night, of what looks like a tall man standing next to a shorter shape of a person, almost as if they were like holding their arm around the person. And at first I thought it was a deer, and I wanted to scare it away from eating my garden, because it was leaning over a garden that I had built with a tree I just recently planted for my partner who had passed away. And I stared at it, and I recognized that it wasn't moving. It wasn't a deer, and it looked like two people. It scared me enough that I went inside and just forced myself to go back to sleep. The next morning, there was a horrible accident, and my mom died at work. And I looked at my partner at the time, who I had told about the shapes of the people, and he had said, well, that was probably your mom and your partner who I had planted the tree for. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know if you call it a forerunner. Thank you.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Wow. I'm sorry for your loss. Now, as far as the story is concerned, there's another angle here that we could explore. An angle that might give purpose to these shadowy shysters. Now, bear with me here, but what if they're harbingers of doom? Part of the paranormal phenomena of forerunners, as Mackenzie had suggested. Predictors of peril. A warning system that something bad is about to go down. Now, I'll keep an ear out for that detail as we push forward here tonight. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe it was something more. But until that information comes in, thank you again, Mackenzie, for sharing the story.
Sometimes those people grasp onto it.
For taking time to weigh in, I
got two bets of the weekend.
Now, if you would, please join me in Virginia by way of Los Angeles. Please welcome Brad to the show.
Hey, Derek. My name's Brad out of Southern California, but my story actually comes from my hometown, my grandparents' house where I grew up at in Hopewell, Virginia. If you know anything about Hopewell or Virginia itself, it's a state full of culture and history, especially early American history. And personally, quite a lot of spirit and ghost stories come from my area. Now, the specific story I got for you is from my 22nd birthday. Me and my best friend, Ricky, we were gamers. We stayed up late, just hanging out, never much of a partier. So it was just him and I, sitting at the house. We had this habit of smoking. Thankfully, we're both done with it. But in that time period, we would every hour or so go out for a cigarette or two and just hang out, listen to music. Now, my grandfather was also a smoker, and he was a insomniac. He didn't sleep well. So oftentimes we would all meet out on the porch and smoke. This particular night, we would go on walks, and sometimes we'd sit in my car just to not disturb anybody. Well, one of the times that we went to my car, Ricky and I are sitting there, again, just talking, listening to music, and we happened to glance off towards the porch. Now, to kind of set the tone, it's a little enclosed porch on the house where everybody goes to smoke just so that nothing gets inside the house and we have a place to comfortably sit. My car is parked directly in front. We gaze off towards the porch and we see what looks like a silhouette of a man just inside the door of the house. My only issue with this was that when we went outside, not 5 minutes before, everybody was asleep. Ricky and I just assumed it was my grandfather, and we were afraid that we woke him up. So we were all concerned, we were like, oh shit, isn't it? We may have disturbed the man. Let us go inside and talk to him. We go back inside, and the only person awake is my dog, Rhea, my husky. We're like, okay, well, maybe we just missed him. Maybe he's already back in bed, no worries. So we go back to our business, go back inside, play our games, whatever. About 45 minutes later, we go out for another smoke. Go back out to the car again. This time, the light flickers on the porch. And we're like, oh, it's definitely Pop this time. But we don't see anybody there. The light's on, but no one is outside. So, we go ahead, we finish up our smoke, and we're like, all right, let's go talk to Pop, make sure that was him. Go inside, and once again, nobody's awake. The house is silent. Grandma's asleep, Pop's asleep. We don't know what's going on. Who turned the light on? I don't know. So we're sitting there. At this point, we're, getting inside of our imagination a little bit. We know what we've been through before. We know the history of the area. And we're, letting our brains play a little bit. But we try to calm down about it. We let my dog, Rhea, we let her outside. She goes out and runs. We have another cigarette on the porch this time just so that we are not mildly interrupted with more confusion. We kind of forget about the moment. We get caught up in our regular conversations, the happy birthdays, what does it feel like to be 22, all that nonsense. And then I look to my right, and my dog is at the door on the inside of the house. Just to clarify, the porch is enclosed on the outside, and we let her out on the porch door. But now she's inside the house. How? So at this point, we are really, truly spooked out. We're sitting there talking, trying to figure out who let Rhea in, who let the dog in. Everybody's asleep. I know I definitely just let her outside. At this point, my grandma has woken up because, again, both of them are insomniacs, and she comes outside. We're like, hey, Grandma, did we bother you? Did we wake you up? She said, no, sweetie, I just heard you guys inside playing games. No worries. Ricky and I look at each other with the full realization that at this point, we've been outside for at least 30, 45 minutes. I asked Grandma, I said, Grandma, we've been outside. Are you sure? She said, yeah, honey, I heard you both laughing, just having a good time, playing your games. We go inside. My TV and Xbox were off. We were outside. Who let Rhea in? Who was in my room laughing? Who did we see on the porch staring dead at us when everybody else was asleep? I don't know. To this day, I still think about it. I live out here in California with my little girl, my old lady, and I still talk to Ricky from time to time, and it's kind of funny that anytime we experience something that we simply cannot explain, him and I just look at each other and we say, who let Rhea in? Anyway, thank you so much for all you do, sir, and keep it spooky.
We appreciate the call, Brad. Shadow Man, turning on the lights. You know, that might be a new one for me. I don't recall ever hearing that detail before. And is it possible that this shadow entity let the dog in as well? Or, it could be possible that there's an unrelated dog doppelganger situation happening here, congruent to this Shadow Man activity. Or perhaps it's just me connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. Well, either way, we thank you, Brad, for the series of unusual events. Now, folks, if you haven't already considered it, you should mosey on over to our merchandise shop at monstersamonguspodcast.com, and by clicking on the shop tab, we have all sorts of items. Most, if not all, have been designed by artists in the paranormal realm, artists that we particularly enjoy. And with the holidays fast approaching, now is the best time to get an order in. The shop is fully stocked, and we all know it's a one-stop shop for all the MAU fans in your life. Again, that's monstersamonguspodcast.com, and click that shop tab. Now up next is a call from Josh, and for this one we head back to the Lone Star State.
Hey Derek, this is Josh from Austin, Texas. So this happened in 2022. Basically, I was asleep in bed, and I want to say I had been sick, like the day before, maybe even that day. But I was asleep in bed, and my partner was asleep next to me. And at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up, and I had the distinct feeling that somebody was standing next to me on my side of the bed. And so I kind of assumed that maybe she was up and she was just kind of checking to see how I was sleeping because I hadn't been feeling good. And just as I was about to kind of like start to drift back off, I felt her move in the bed next to me. And so at this point I was like, oh, that's weird. And I opened my eyes. I looked kind of over to the side where I thought I kind of felt like somebody was standing. I opened my eyes, and what I saw when I opened my eyes was basically like the outline of a person from like the shoulders up, like a bust of a person, but it was totally black and kind of hazy looking, kind of the classic how people describe shadow people as being like darker than the dark around them. And it was just there for a few seconds, right above me, kind of like to the side. And then I blinked and it went away. And then, just like people say in a lot of stories, I just kind of went back to sleep, which made me laugh in retrospect because a lot of times I listen to these stories where people are just like, yeah, and then I just threw the covers over my head and went back to sleep. And I'm like, how did you do that? But that's exactly what happened. And I don't think it was sleep paralysis because, one, I've never experienced that before. And I was able to move. I kind of rolled a little bit to the side and moved my head to look where I thought I felt something. So, maybe. But usually people report not being able to move or feeling like they can't move or speak or do anything. And I definitely didn't feel that way. Nor did I feel any kind of malevolence or dread or anything like that. It was just kind of there and then it was gone. And then I was like, okay, going back to bed. So that's the story. And yeah, talk to you next time.
Thanks, Josh. And that's not the first time tonight that we've heard that detail. That an experiencer just went back to sleep. Because Mackenzie, too, did the exact same thing. You know, the human brain is an incredible machine. And it wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of self-preservation mechanism at work here. But it's also possible that whatever these entities are have that effect on us as well. Thanks, Josh, for sharing tonight. Now, folks, I have plenty more to share, but it's time for another pause in the action. We have mouths to feed, after all. Now don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Yesterday's game for some of that, there was
To be afraid, to be scared.
I don't know what the plan is.
Now, if you would, meet me in Canada, where we rendezvous with an anonymous caller up in Montreal.
Hello again, Monsters Among Us. I'm currently living in Montreal, Canada, but I'm originally from southwestern Ontario, in a small town called Chatham-Kent. Now, if you're driving southwest on the 401 highway, it's pretty much the only slightly significant stop between London, Ontario, and the Windsor-Detroit border crossing. So, while growing up, my family lived outside of town, in an old country farmhouse out on a long, dusty dirt road. The house itself was on a plot of just under 2 acres, fronted by a long gravel driveway, running along the right side of the property and up to the house, which was nestled back perhaps 70 to 80 yards from the road. Now, the property was also all lined with trees, which gave us quite a nice bit of secluded privacy growing up, but also, no direct communication or line of sight with neighbors either. So, the house is quite old, built sometime in the early 1900s, and served as a farming homestead for the majority of its lifetime. My bedroom in this house was up on the upper floor, which required to climb up an old wooden staircase. Now, the staircase is important, so I'll describe it here. It started with 4 steps up to a landing, where you would then turn to the left 90 degrees and climb up another 15 to the upper floor. Now, because it was so old, the staircase was exceptionally creaky, and unless you mapped out these creaks like my siblings and I had, it was nearly impossible to make it up or down the stairs silently. So this was good and bad. Good because we would always get a bit of a warning if my parents were coming up to check on us, and bad because it was hard for us to sneak down without my parents hearing us, as their bedroom was right underneath part of the staircase. So my bedroom was at the top of the staircase on the left, on the 2nd floor, and I had a wooden door with a white poster on the outside. My bed and my bedside light was in the corner of the bedroom facing the door, and my door opened into my bedroom. So when it was open, day or night, I could clearly see the white poster on my bedroom door. At night, my parents also kept a light on downstairs that would beam up the staircase and slightly illuminate my doorway, making this white poster stand out in the darkness quite clearly. So my encounter took place during my early teenage years, maybe about 20 years ago or so now. But it's still as vivid in my memory as if it was yesterday. Because it's been so long, I can't quite place the time of year, although I know it had to have been in the winter months, as I was quite ill with the flu at this time, and this tends to only really ever happen as the seasons change. This bout had been considerably debilitating, and I recall on this specific day I had been rather bedridden with an impressive fever, somewhere between 103 and 104 throughout the day. So I'd spent most of the day in bed, and had finally managed to fall asleep sometime in the early evening. Now, it was about 3:32 a.m. when I suddenly awoke from sleep, and I remember this time specifically, as I had one of those old retro-style, red-numbered digital alarm clocks, and this time seemed to have just somehow burned itself into my memory as I noticed the clock through the darkness. So, after waking, I sat in bed thinking of how strange it was to have randomly awoken, when I heard something stirring on the ground floor of the house. Now, as I had been sick, I had expected it was one of my parents getting up to come check on me. So I sat in silence for a moment, listening to the footfalls on the ground floor, when suddenly I heard the stereotypical creak given off by the first stair on our staircase. This was soon followed by a gap, as the second stair didn't creak, but then a second and third creak, as the third and fourth stairs did. And then a hard thud as someone landed on the landing. So, thinking it was one of my parents coming to check on me, this is when I called out, "Mom?" which got no reply. And then, "Dad?" and the same thing again, silence. Then, again, I heard the footfalls on the staircase ascending from the landing to the 2nd floor. And as each step landed, came with it the expected creak that's given off by each stair as you climb. I again called out, "Mom?" as the footfall climbed the stairs, but still didn't receive an answer. So I sat in darkness listening to the feet on the stairs until finally I heard the second hard thud of a foot landing on the landing on the 2nd floor at the top of the stairs. At this point, having not received a reply from either of my parents, I sat slightly confused but no longer half asleep, staring from my bed in the corner of my room towards my open bedroom door. As I listened to whoever climbed the stairs approaching my room, I stared at my open doorway, waiting to see which of my parents was to come check on me. Now, I don't remember seeing anyone progressively fill the doorway, and in my memory, it seems almost as if I had merely blinked, when suddenly my doorframe was filled with this tall, broad, dark, human-shaped figure. The encounter seemed to me as almost hypnotic, as I couldn't take my eyes off of what I was trying to discern was standing in my doorway. It seemed to be a man, or I gave it a male identity, and it was tall, based on the size of the doorframe, likely close to 6.5 feet. Broad as well, as the torso of the figure spanned across my door and obscured the white poster behind it from my view. And I mean, blacked out this poster. The most peculiar feature of all was its apparent clothing, which included some sort of wide-brimmed hat, like a gambler, a Havana, or a safari-style hat. And it was wearing a long trench coat-style, knee-length or longer cloak or coat. The figure was dark, blacker than the darkest corner of my room, and it had no discernible facial features. The figure simply stood in my doorway, staring at me, staring at it, from my bed in the corner of my room. As I mentioned, I was entranced, but whether it was fear, surprise, confusion, or something entirely different, I somehow managed to urge myself to act, and swiftly swung my body around to my bedside light to flick it on. But when I whipped back, I found that whatever had been in my doorway was no longer there. Totally freaked out at this point, I ran through the house, knife in hand through all the rooms, flicking on all the lights, searching for whatever or whoever could have just been at my door. After waking my entire family and seeing they had all been soundly asleep, I was dumbfounded. Everyone was adamant it hadn't been them, and I'd quickly grown to accept, after realizing everybody had been asleep, that it wasn't. Now, it was only recently that I came across others' stories of the Hat Man and the Shadow Man here on Monsters Among Us, and it floored me, as I believe my story might very well have been an encounter of my own. And I'll add before you cite my fever, at the time I awoke, I had checked with my family, and I no longer had a fever, as I believed at the time, as most of you would, that it was likely a fever-induced hallucination. Thanks so much for letting me share my story. I love the podcast and all you and your team do. Thanks again, and I'll be listening.
Thank you, caller. Now, since I'm looking for patterns here, I should point out that this is at least the second time the experiencer was sick during a sighting. So do you think the ancient prophecies are true? That a dose of the cold medication, NyQuil, will usher you to a realm where the Hat Man lurks? Or maybe that's just an internet meme. Well, it's creepy stuff, no matter how you slice it, caller. And we can't thank you enough for sharing tonight. Now, our next entry originates out of the state of Arizona. Please welcome Holly to the platform.
Hi, Derek. First-time caller here. This is Hallie calling from Arizona. I'm calling to tell everybody about my definite sleep paralysis story. I find it a little bit different than what others have described, and it's also the first time I've ever experienced sleep paralysis. So this happened 2 nights ago. I was having a hard time sleeping because I think I drank too much coffee during the day earlier. So I was kind of in this weird state of being tired but not able to sleep. Went to bed around 11, and I think in the next 2 to 3 hours is when I had the sleep paralysis experience. So sometime around 1 to 2 in the morning. It started off by me hearing the sounds of something clomping up the stairs. And at the time I thought maybe in my sleepy state that it was painters on the roof because we're getting our condo painted right now. So at first I didn't register it, but it was so loud and it's such a weird time of the night that I finally registered that it was not normal. And I started getting really freaked out, thinking that something or somebody was coming up the stairs. At this point, I opened my eyes, and when I'm in my bed, I'm facing the doorway. The thing I saw walking through my doorway was at least 6 feet tall. The best way I can think of describing it is very tall, and it had horns, like really wide horns, which was super strange. And it looked like it had like animal skins on its head, kind of like it was wearing a skull, I guess, or something like that. I couldn't see the face. It was all just in shadow because we do have a low light hallway light that would be behind this thing. So at that point, I started screaming in my sleep, or trying to, kind of that silent scream that's super frustrating because you can't do anything, which at this point I realized I was experiencing sleep paralysis because I couldn't get up, I couldn't move. I was trying to scream for my partner that was sleeping right next to me. Obviously, he didn't hear me. At this point, when I realized that that was what I was experiencing, I closed my eyes and took a couple deep breaths, and it was like all the stress just kind of left. And then I opened my eyes and the thing was gone, and I guess I just went back to bed after that. So super short experience, but the description of it was very different than what I've heard from anybody else ever explain when they have sleep paralysis experiences. So I thought I should call that in. Be interested to see if anybody has seen anything similar to that in any other context at all. Thanks for taking my call, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Holly. What do you think, folks? Sleep paralysis? Or was this a genuine Shadow Man encounter? And what is the deal with the horns? I sort of remember hearing that detail a time or two on past episodes. I vaguely remember commenting that perhaps the Hat Man wears a hat to cover up those horns. If that rings any bells for anyone, please let me know. Now I have tons more to share with you, so keep it right here for more shadow entities. Don't touch that dial.
We'll have that coming up during the commercial break.
Really the reason why we won that game. Yeah.
Shadow more climate, I think, is what we're...
Man, y'all have a good one.
No problem.
Now this next story takes us to California. Gracie, the mic is yours.
Hey, this is Gracie. I currently reside in Los Angeles, but the story I'm about to tell you happened in my childhood bedroom at my parents' home in Thousand Oaks. Just to give you some backstory, I always had trouble sleeping when I was younger, in that room especially. I've had many sleep paralysis spells and still get them here and there, but this case was the worst. I went home to visit family with my boyfriend. We slept in my room, and around 3 a.m., I woke up, and when I looked around my room, it had turned into a pure white marble space that must have been 10 times in size. My wall to my left was gone, and now was 2 big open French doors leading into my backyard, which also changed drastically in size, like a wide open field with a fire pit in the middle, where I saw multiple non-human-like troll creatures dancing and chanting around the fire. To the right of them stood 3 tall, black, pointy hooded beings with slits for eyes. When looking at them, I felt an overwhelming heat and pleasure, almost sexual. I felt I was meeting the devil and he was calling me in. For a second, I wanted to go to him. I got very frightened. I turned to my boyfriend, who was facing me sleeping. I tried to wake him, but couldn't get my strength to move or talk. He woke a little, and said I love you in a whisper, and rolled to the other side. I felt helpless. I tried to think about my parents being in the next room for some sort of ease and safety. When I did this, a white angel-like spirit came from the field, past the hooded and troll-like beings, which I felt were demonic, and I floated straight to her. My body released, I could move and talk, and my bedroom was back to normal. I know this may seem very dreamlike, but I've dealt with sleep paralysis on and off my whole life, and never experienced something this akin to waking life. It's really hard to convey or help others understand how non-dreamlike this was and utterly real it felt to me. I quickly woke up my boyfriend, a bit upset that he rolled over and didn't see me struggling. I told him all about it and he convinced me to submit it here. Anyways, we love the podcast and appreciate the time you devote to it. Thanks.
We appreciate you calling, Gracie. What do you think, folks? Was this simply a bout with sleep paralysis? Or did Gracie get a glimpse into the dimension from which these ominous voids originated? Trolls, the devil, home remodeling, and possible mirrored man. This call had everything. And everything it had sounded downright terrifying. So thank you again, Gracie, for sharing the phone call. Well, that brings us to tonight's final entry. Savannah, also in California. Welcome to the show.
Hi, my name is Savannah, and I am from Southern California, specifically San Diego. So I live in a house where the front half of the house is a cottage, and it was built in the 1950s, and the back half of the house was built, I believe, in the 1980s. We aren't really sure because it was built illegally, so there's not really any building records on the house, but that is our guess just based off of how the house looks and all its fixtures. Anyways, I have lived in this house for the past 10 years. I've lived with my dad, my sister, and I have a 4-year-old son, and he's lived there his whole life as well. When we first moved in there, we didn't really have anything weird go on, but as time progressed, we've had some strange sightings. So one night, and it's happened multiple times since then, I will be walking in the second half of my house. So in the front half, you have the living room. On the left side, you have a bedroom. On the right side, you have a bedroom. And on the right side, you also have a bathroom. That's the cottage that was built in the 1950s. And that is where I've always seen a tall, dark figure. Never seen his face, never seen his clothing. All I can tell is that it is a man, and he is very tall, well over 6 feet, because I'm 6 foot and he's probably 6'5", if I had to guess. Whenever I've seen anything that I couldn't explain, I always kept it to myself. So when I would see him, I obviously would be a little kind of thrown off and be scared. I never mentioned it with my sister or my dad or anyone like that, so I just kind of kept it to myself. He never really did anything. I would just see him walk across the living room, and when I was 15, we've been living in the house for 2 years now. I got a dog, and her name's Lacey. She's a golden retriever, but everybody, tells you that dogs are more susceptible to telling you where and what things are that you can't see. She was in the living room. It's a year later, so I'm 16, and she does not want to go in my father's room, which is the room on the right when you walk in the front door. And she does not set foot in that room. She will not get near it, not because it's a male and alpha, but she just kind of looks at the room and kind of walks away in a scared way, and she won't go in what we consider our office, which is the bedroom on the left-hand side in the front of the house, which was built in the 1950s. And that room, I only go in that room during the day. I don't go through it at night. I don't go on that side of the house. I stay on my side of the house because I haven't had anything happen. Well, a couple years later, after the dog started noticing some things in the front of the house, I walked into my sister's room. I'm like, hey, have you ever felt anything in this house or seen anything? My sister's a very spiritual person, and she loves Wiccan, pagan stuff. She's not religious. She's just very spiritual and one with nature. And so she's mentioned, when I sat down with her and asked her this, she said, well, when I meditate, I have someone come to me. And I don't know who the person is. All I know is it's a tall male figure. And I can't see his face. I can't see what he's wearing. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, well, I see him too. I see him in the front half of the house. Our bedrooms were in the second half of the house, built in the 80s. So it was kind of weird to me that she would feel/see him because she was in the back half of the house, and that's not where I would see him. But since the house is connected, I would think, if there is a shadow person, he probably could go in between the different sections because it's wide open. There's no doors or walls separating the two sides of the house. And so she continues to say, well, I've never really gotten any bad feeling from this person. I just see them, and then they just come up to me, and then they leave. And I'm like, okay. I haven't ever gotten a bad feeling either. It's more of just say, okay, you're there. You're walking across the living room. I feel like I'm seeing things, but I've seen you so many times. I know I'm not seeing things. So a couple years pass. I become pregnant, and I'm pregnant with my son. So I am 18 at the time. And I'm about to give birth, and I'm going to bring my son home into this house. I'm just relaxing. I'm still seeing the shadow person. It's the exact same person. There's no changes, and there's only one, this tall male. And I'm just sitting on the couch, and my dad comes up to me, and he's like, hey, have you had anything happen in the house or feel anything? And it kind of caught me off guard because my father's not a spiritual person. He is religious in the fact that he will go to church if someone invites him, but he usually doesn't believe in those sort of things. And so it was weird that he kind of came up to me and asked me just this random question out of the blue while I'm pregnant. And I said, I've seen like a shadow or like a person. And my dad's like, I felt that. I felt a evil, kind of mean feeling when I'm in the front half of the house. And I've seen this person. I've seen this tall male in the house as well. And I just wanted to bring it up because last night I felt this heavy, mean presence. It wasn't a happy presence. I felt it in my room, and I told him, you are not going to touch that baby. You are not going to go in the back room, and you're not going to touch that baby. And I kept repeating myself until it went away, until that feeling of dread and mean spirit, whatever was in my room, this is my father talking, whatever was in my room, I told him, you do not touch that baby. That baby is good. And ever since then, my son was born, a couple months later, we have not seen anything. We haven't seen any shadow people. We haven't seen this tall male. My father hasn't felt or seen any evil or mean spirit. And my dog actually will go in the front room, and she will go in my father's room and the office, which is part of the 1950s house. Ever since he talked to whatever that was, we have not felt or seen anything. That's my story, but I really enjoy your show, and keep up the good work. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Incredible stuff, Savannah. thanks for calling in. Now, you know, it's not lost on me that so many people in the house had experiences, nor that people that normally wouldn't believe in activity like this had surrendered and admitted they too experienced it. It's compelling anecdotal evidence, which sadly is the most common quote-unquote evidence available in this field. So we take what we can get. Now, as thrilling and terrifying as Savannah's call was, like each of the others here tonight, her call does little to solve the mystery. It only intrigues us more and adds layers to the lore. Now, a big thanks to Savannah for calling in. I'm glad to hear someone was sticking up for the little guy. And a big thanks to you, listener, for swinging by here tonight. The Monsters Among Us podcast is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Copyright Rent Grow Media. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes, Delaney Bowers, and Connor Ryan. All audio used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. Now please give us a like and follow on our social media accounts. Join our Discord server, give us a like and follow on YouTube, and leave us a rate and review wherever that kind of thing is possible. Now don't forget you can catch the show every Saturday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern on the UNX Digital Network. Just visit unxnetwork.com to tune in. And finally, tonight's score was provided by Iron Cthulhu Apocalypse, Co.ag Music, and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Now don't forget to watch our film Shadows in the Desert. Visit BorregoTriangle.com to tune in. It's a great spooky season watch, and it's 100% free on Tubi and I'm pretty sure Amazon Prime. And international folks, you only have until December 31st to rent or buy Shadows in the Desert. After that, it'll no longer be available. And lastly, be sure to join us in the Beyond. $5 a month for days worth of bonus content, and only $1 a month for ad-free regular content. Just visit monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the Patreon tab. And we'll catch you all back here on Thursday with a brand new installment. But until then, you keep it spooky, and you have yourselves a good night.